So we're gonna start the live banter before Dale. I don't even know if Dale's gonna make it. You guys are live. I want to lead. I want to share with all of you that I got a text from Dale. I think it was like 6 minutes ago, and he said, I'm expecting everyone to wear a jacket and a tie. So this has been problematic for me because I have kind of a Southern California aesthetic now that I live in San Diego, and I don't know, jacket and tie is, I don't even know if we wear a jacket and tie to funerals, Dale. But then I found out the reason is because we're on TV. Dale, is that why we're wearing jacket and ties?
This is the most effective response to your
This is how Dale treats me all the time. For all the time I've known him, this has been his strategy. Ignore Chris. You're talking to Dale. You're talking to the round part.
Because then I'd be the one saying it, right? Yeah? Am I right? Well, thanks.
He's gonna do this all night.
Are you tired, Dale? Are you tired?
Where is it?
Send Joe a text. Are those the Czech boys over there? Nicholas, John Paul? Is that John Paul on the left?
And Austin, lead guitar, the Dead Century.
Yeah, all right. Good to see you, boys.
Ladies and gentlemen, Dale Alquist.
Welcome to Tuesdays with the Troubadour, the Friday night edition. The Troubadours were born out of two things. Tuesdays with the Troubadours, that is.
Like most things are born out of two things.
One of them was the Prairie Troubadour that was created by Dan Kerr in honor of his father. And actually the first Troubadour conference was actually not called that.
Right, it was called the Troubadour.
No. The very first conference, which I think was on Islam,
Yes.
didn't have a name. We didn't have a, you
I
had
think it
no
was called
name
the
for
Prairie
con-
Troubadour.
It was called the Prairie Troubadour.
No.
Okay, thank you.
We,
Thank you for
I'd like to say
correcting
for the
Actually,
record, Dale Alquist was there.
it actually didn't have a name, the first conference that you held. But then you talked about your father and called him the Prairie Troubadour. And then
You see how
I
history gets
suggested
rewritten.
that call your conference the Prairie Troubadour Conference. So the second year, it was then called the Prairie Troubadour Conference.
It was your idea.
Yeah, it was.
Did you see what?
Yeah.
Did you see what I just did?
All right. Now, Tuesdays with the Troubadour was born out of COVID. And it was because at the Prairie Troubadour Conference hosted by Dan
Named by
Kerr-
Dale.
Yeah, named by Dale, but hosted by Dan in Fort Scott, Kansas in February, where spring is you just get a little hint of spring there in Kansas. Usually a giant snowstorm is how it is greeted, yeah. And
Unlike Minneapolis in February, where you're really getting a hint of spring.
And the way that Dan set up the conference is that everyone gives their talks, and then at the end of the conference, we get up on the stage, similar to this, and we do Q&A with the audience. And that's when there was just a great spirit. It just all kind of comes together. People aren't bored by listening to a long talk, and there was good repartee between the speakers, and that's what there was that effect that was just unusual and special about it. And William contacted us during COVID and said, "I missed the Prairie Troubadour, and I missed that last session of the Q&A, that time when we're all together." And we wanted to somehow recreate that online, which was such a tall order, such a tall task when we couldn't be together, but try to create the feeling of being together. And I think we had a Zoom call and talked about it, and we said, well, let's do something. Let's have a show, a really big show, and we'll do it online, and we'll call it the Troubadour Summit. And that's what, and we did it every week. We did it weekly for 5 weeks, and we each took.
Because that's how long COVID was supposed to last.
Because there were 5 of us, and then so we did one for each of us, and where one of us gave a talk, and then the other 4 would tear it apart and belittle the speaker, and we got through the hour that way. But then at the end of 5 weeks, as some people pointed out, COVID was not over, and so we said, well, let's keep going, and we did it a couple more times, and then we decided to do it monthly, and we did it on a Tuesday, and we've been doing it for since
30 years now.
2019, and so that's how it started, and it's become quite popular. There are dozens of people who listen to this each month. And some months, not all of us could be here for usually Joseph has a talk somewhere, and the next month then he has a talk somewhere else, and it's often just 4 of us, and we bemoan the fact that Joseph isn't there. But then when he does show up, then two of the other of us are gone. But we seldom all 5 of us get together, except for those really special times. But we always tell we're focusing in on the Chesterton Conference when we're all going to be together, live on stage, the Troubadours. So, and for those who don't know us, Joseph Pierce, William Fahey, Dale Ahlquist, and Dan Kerr. Now, two of the Troubadours just got here in the nick of time. This morning I was trying to squeeze in a few minutes of sleep after the afterglow before I had to get up, and my phone starts rattling, and it's William and Joseph texting the rest of us about their travel experiences getting here, because yesterday William was in England. And he flew from England to his home in New Hampshire, and he got that 1 or 2 minutes of sleep before getting on a plane early this morning and trying to get here. And Joseph was starting from Sparta, North Dakota, South Carolina, and you have to take you could there's an airport near him, but the planes don't actually go anywhere, so they both had this long, arduous trip to get here, and they said, well, let's have a race to see who gets there first. And they would say, I'm getting coffee now. I'm walking down to the gate now. And they just described every movement they were doing to each other. I should be there in 2 hours. Oh, my plane just got canceled. How about yours? And they were originally.
Do you want me to read it? I've got the text.
I've got it too.
We can reenact it.
Yeah, we could reenact it, but let's not. Okay. In fact, at one point, Joseph says, "I'm in the queue right now to get on the plane. It's probably going to last 2 hours." And William says, "Get out of the queue and get into the line." All right. Tonight's theme. For the Troubadours, which was chosen by Chris Check. Oh, look, Chris is here. I didn't think you were going to come tonight. That's great. Chris is here. Thanks for coming, too, Chris.
Thanks for having me, Dale.
The theme is going to be, we're going to each do a poem that may or may not have something to do with the theme of the conference.
I think there was a little more conversation about how the
No,
theme-
that's what it was, Chris. That's done. And I just gave you credit for, and that's the last time you're going to get credit tonight. So just enjoy that, okay? By the way, you look great tonight. Yeah.
Someone told me to put on a tie.
You look like you've been to a funeral in California. So we each are going to do a poem or two.
I don't think anybody dies in California,
within our
Dale.
5 minutes, and then the others are going to make a short, brief reaction to the poem, and then the next person will do it. And being the hosting troubadour tonight, I will decide who goes first. And I know that last year I made you go first, Chris, and you hated that.
I've wiped out those memories, Dale. Therapy, we have that in California.
But I will go first instead, because everybody hates going first. But this way, I'll be done. And then I can use the rest of my energy to insult you two in 3 and 4. So I'm going to read some poems by a little-known poet named Hilaire Belloc. And even though Belloc married a woman from California.
So did I. Careful.
Okay, let me begin again. I'm going to read some poems about hell. Made no reference to California whatsoever. Okay. And the first one is The Ballad of Hell and Mrs. Robeck. But I need to quick introduce Mrs. Robeck, who is the subject of one of Belloc's epigrams. Good morning, Algernon. Good morning, Percy. Good morning, Mrs. Robeck. Christ have mercy. All right. So that establishes a little bit about who Mrs. Robeck is. I'm going out to dine at Gray's with Bertie Morden, Charles and Kit, and Manderley, who never pays, and Jane, who wins in spite of it, and Algernon, who won't admit the truth about his curious hair and teeth that very nearly fit. And Mrs. Robeck will be there. And then tomorrow someone says that someone else has made a hit in one of Mr. Twister's plays, and off we go to yawn at it. And when it's petered out, we quit for number 20 Taunton Square and smoke and drink and dance a bit. And Mrs. Robeck will be there. And so through each declining phase of emptied effort, jaded wit, and day by day of London days, obscurely, more obscurely lit, until the uncertain shadows flit, announcing to the shuddering air a darkening and the end of it. And Mrs. Robeck will be there. Prince, on their iron thrones they sit, impassable to our despair, the dreadful guardians of the pit. And Mrs. Robeck will be there. And then one more brief poem, To Dives. Dives is the traditional name of the rich man in the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. Lazarus, the poor man who died and was taken up to the bosom of Abraham, and Dives, the rich man who went.
The what of Abraham?
Was that the bosom?
The bosom? No, you said the bosom.
Yeah, I said the bosom.
All right.
That's what it says in the Holy Scripture.
Yeah. I'm not going to argue with a one-time Baptist.
Yeah.
About Scripture.
I still know my Bible, except for those Catholic ones. All right. Yeah, bosom of Abraham. But the name Dives isn't in the gospel. That's a traditional name added to the name of the rich man. He was just called the rich man in the parable. Whereas Lazarus has a name.
Uh-huh.
And it's the same name as the friend of Jesus who was risen from the dead, but has nothing to do with it. But it confuses a lot of people.
I'm still thinking about how I'm going to use bosom in conversation going forward.
It's the plural of booze. One booze, two boozing. It is.
That's good. Yeah.
Could someone turn up the lights? Because
No.
I tell the truth better when it's brighter.
No.
It's not bright enough.
It's third degree, man. You know, you will.
I've
you
been
will
in England 2 weeks.
you-
I feel like I'm going to just burn.
And you
to
are
death.
going to burn.
Next
so
to you.
We're on TV. The lights have to be on.
This is like the half an hour no one gets to see before we go live.
So Dives, the rich man, and what's happening in this poem is the narrator of the poem is a poet, a scribbler, and he's addressing Dives as they both try to, as they both enter hell together. There's a reference to Charon. Does everybody know who Charon is? Okay, good. And then.
She's really mean. I've seen her at Whole Foods, Karen.
How would you pronounce that?
I'd say
I was wondering if that's what you'd say. I'm not gonna. Yeah. Okay. I was just wondering if, being a classicist, you had a special. All right. I will. Okay. Here it goes.
Your instincts are right.
Yeah. All right. Good. To Dives. Dives. When you and I go down to hell, where scribblers end and millionaires as well, we shall be carrying our separate backs, two very large but different packs. And as you stagger under yours, my friend, down the dull shore where all our journeys end, and go before me, as your rank demands, towards the infinite flat underlands and that dear river of forgetfulness, Charon, a man of exquisite address, for as your wife's progenitors could tell, They're very strict on etiquette in hell. That's really good, isn't it? Yeah. I mean, that's really... Okay. Car and Will, since you are a lord, observe, my lord, we cannot take these weighty things aboard. Then down they go, my wretched Dives, down. The 15 sorts of boots you kept for town, the hat to meet the devil in, the plain but costly ties, the cases of champagne, the solid watch and seal and chain and charm, the working model of a burning farm, to give the little Belials, and all 3 biscuits for Cerberus, the guarantee from Lambeth that the rich can never burn, and even promising safe return. That's really good. The admirable overcoat designed to cross Cocytus, very warmly lined, sweet Dives, you will leave them all behind and enter hell as tattered and as bare as was your father when he took the air, behind a barrow load in Leicester Square. Then turn to me, and noting one that brings with careless step a mist of shadowy things, laughter and memories and a few regrets, some honor and a quantity of debts, a doubt or two of sorts, a trust in God, and what will seem to you extremely odd, his father, grandfather's father's father's name, unspoilt, untitled, even spelt the same, Charon, who 20,000 times before has ferried poets to the ulterior shore, will estimate the weight I bear and cry, comrade! He himself has been known to try his hand at Latin and Italian verse, much in the style of Virgil, only worse. We let such vain imaginaries pass. Then tell me, Dives, which will look the ass? You or myself or Charon? Who can tell? They order things so damnably in hell. Well, thank you. I figured that from there we have only to go up. And so I think probably the one who would have followed the assignment the closest would have been Dan Kerr. So you're going to go next, my friend Dan. Give us a good poem.
You want to go up?
Yeah, I want to go up. I want to go up.
2 poems. I'll just launch into the first one. My heart leaps up when I behold a rainbow in the sky. So was it when my life began. So is it now I am a man. So be it when I shall grow old, or let me die. The child is father of the man, and I could wish my days to be bound each to each by natural piety. That's Wordsworth. You wanted to go up? We go up.
Great.
Last night, I was pleased to hear Wordsworth get a little bit of credit. Chesterton mentioned that after Francis, the first name he mentioned after Francis, who really understood or had this kind of particular insight into the proper relation with the natural world, was Wordsworth. And I was taught that poem there, which is very short, and also the one I'm about to recite. I was taught these in high school. And I would encourage you all who have young children to have your kiddos memorize poetry. Amen. Because it is a wonderful gift. These poems have been rattling around in my imagination, doing hidden work, I think, really, for the last 25 years. And I think they have been forming me. at a subconscious level. And when I learned about the theme for this year's conference, and then I began reading Chesterton's book on St. Francis, these poems just kept coming to mind. So the next one, a sonnet, I believe. The world is too much with us, late and soon, getting and spending, we lay waste our powers. Little we see in nature that is ours. We have given our hearts away, a sordid boon. The sea that bears its bosom to the moon, the winds that will be howling at all hours and are upgathered now like sleeping flowers. For this, for everything, we are out of tune. It moves us not. Great gods, I'd rather be a pagan, suckled in a creed outworn. So might I, standing on this pleasant lea, have glimpses that would make me less forlorn. Have sight of Proteus rising from the sea, or hear old Triton blow his wreathed horn. There you go.
All right, that was great.
William Wordsworth. Both
Yep.
both by William Wordsworth. I think one of the most unheralded poets. Probably my favorite lyric poet. So yeah, last night was a good night. Wordsworth and Dylan got a mention. So those are my guys.
And that was great how Chester made the connection with St. Francis and Wordsworth. And he actually made the poem appropriate to the theme. You see how he did that? That was great. That was great. Well, Joseph, you're the only one here who speaks English. You would have picked out a good poem or two for us tonight, wouldn't you have?
I would. And I also stuck to the theme. I'm going to very briefly give a 2-minute précis of the Franciscan elements of the most Franciscan of all of Shakespeare's plays, and that's King Lear. And then I'm going to read a poem about some Franciscan sisters who died in the shipwreck. So those of you that know that particular poem, you know what I'm talking about already. So the key ingredient, the key element of King Lear is, what is foolishness, what is madness? And there are two fools in King Lear. There's the worldly fool, who's called the fool, and he gets basically, you were stupid to give your money away, stupid to give your power away. It's all about empowerment, and you've given it away. And then he disappears for no reason in the middle of the play. Now, if you and I did that, if you were doing an MFA program in creative writing, and you create a character who has all the best lines and the greatest wit, and then he disappears without trace, without any explanation in the middle of the plot, right? You'd be saying, well, forget it. You're obviously not born to be a writer. Do something else. But clearly Shakespeare's did it for a reason, and the reason is that the worldly fool was exorcised by the Franciscan fool. So the Franciscan fool, Poor Tom, is actually heralded by a Franciscan ballad, which is sung. So we've got something different happening here, and we have this otherworldly foolishness. And King Lear, listening to the otherworld, the holy fool, the jongleur de Dieu, the Franciscan, does what St. Francis does. He strips himself naked and says, off you lendings. And so I want to talk about that, but that's not the poem. Although that whole play is a poem. I want to read parts of one of my favorite poems, and one of my, I say sometimes that G.K. Chesterton, so G.K. Chesterton said about an hour ago, if you were here, and if Chesterton said it must be right. He said, I write a book every week. But I do know that when I die, there are going to be hundreds of books that I meant to read and didn't read, and there will be dozens of books I meant to write and didn't write. But one book I'd like to write is I'd like to write a meditation on suffering based upon one poem by Jeremiah Hopkins called The Wreck of the Deutschland, which is 35 stanzas. And I'd like to write about 1,000 words on each stanza. And it's a great meditation on suffering. So those who don't know the poem, I'm not going to read the whole thing because it's very long. I'm going to read the most Franciscan, obviously Franciscan part of it, and then the final prayer from it. But it's about, the Deutschland was a ship, and it was shipwrecked off the eastern coast of England in the 1870s. Can't remember the exact date now. 1871 maybe. Anyway, and on board this, a quarter of those on board perished either through drowning or exposure. It was grounded on a sandbank in a blizzard. It didn't sink. But amongst those were 5 Franciscan sisters, and they were exiles from their homeland of Germany because of the Kulturkampf, because of Bismarck's anti-Catholic revolution in Germany and Prussia. And they won their way over here, actually, to the Midwest, I think Missouri, but to the Midwest to establish the Franciscan convent. They never made it because all 5 of them perished. In the newspaper reports about this shipwreck, a lot of the newspapers talked about the survivors referencing this giantess of a nun who was about 6 foot tall. And as they were dying, people were dying all around. She was like a St. John the Baptist figure who was calling them to repentance. So when Jeremiah Hopkins read this newspaper report, it inspired him to write this poem. The first 10 stanzas are a general meditation upon suffering itself, and the next 25 stanzas are a narrative about the shipwreck. So I'm going to read the few stanzas that are particularly about these sisters, and particularly about this one sister, and then I'm going to read the final stanza of the poem. Unfortunately, I don't have the gift of Dan and others to recite from memory. I did not have that blessing growing up, and it shows. Sister, a sister calling, a master, her master and mine, and the inboard seas run swirling and hauling, the rash smart sloggering brine blinds her, but she that weathers sees the thing, it's on my eyes, sorry, sees one thing, has one fetch in her. She rears herself to divine ears and the call of the tall nun to the men in the tops and the tackle rode over the storms brawling. She was first of a 5 and came of a coifed sisterhood. O Deutschland, double a desperate name, O worldwide of its good. But Gertrude, Lily, and Luther are 2 of a town, Christ Lily and beast of the waste wood. From life's dawn it is drawn down, Abel is Cain's brother, and breast they have sucked the same. Loathed for a love men knew in them, banned by the land of their birth, Rhine refused them, Thames would ruin them, surf, snow, river, and earth. Gnashed. But thou art above, thou Orion of light, thy unchancelling poising palms were weighing the worth, thou martyr master in thy sight, stormflakes were scroll-leaved flowers, lily showers, sweet heaven was astrew in them. 5. The finding and sake and cipher and suffering Christ. Mark, the mark is of man's make, and the word of it sacrificed. But he scores it in scarlet himself on his own bespoken. Before time taken, dearest prized and priced, stigma, signal, cinquefoil token for lettering of the lamb's fleece, ruddying of the rose flake. Joyful to thee, Father Francis, drawn to the life that died. With the knolls of the nails in thee, niche of the lance, his love crucified, and seal of his seraph arrival, and these thy daughters, and 5 livid and leavid, favour and pride are sisterly sealed in wild waters, to bathe in his full gold mercies, to breathe in his all-fire glances. So they're the stanzas about that I've selected. I want to finish, though, because this Hopkins canonizes this giantess of a Franciscan sister. So he finishes the poem with a prayer to her for the conversion of England. Dame at our door, drowned and among our shoals, remember us in the roads, the heaven haven of the reward, our king back, oh, upon English souls. Let him Easter in us, be a dayspring to the dimness of us, be a crimson cresseted east, more brightening her rare dear Britain as his reign rolls. Pride, rose, prince, hero of us, high priest, our hearts' charities, hearth's fire, our thoughts' chivalries, throngs lord.
So that nun is a historical character, right?
Yes, that's a real shipwreck, 1870 something.
Right.
Yeah.
Do we know what the nun's name is?
No.
But she is a saint.
As far as Hopkins is concerned, as far as I'm concerned, yes.
I mean, we should start praying for the conversion of England. I mean, that's what we should be doing.
I do it all the time.
Well, you know what? I'm going to too. In fact, I'm going to be invoking a certain Englishman for his intercession, because I believe he would want to see the conversion of England as well. Yeah. And we have you've just the king to do the conversion, because once he converts, then that's going to the Anglican Church. That's how it's going to happen. And the King Charles Spaniels will be even more valuable. Am I right? Am I right?
Yes.
I mean, they're already more valuable because we have a King Charles. But just think when he converts, how valuable your dogs will be.
The value of our dogs is actually associated with the kennel name, which is Top Meadow. Yeah? TopMeadowCavaliers.com.
It almost sounded for a minute like you were contradicting me.
I can't imagine how anything I would ever say would sound like that, Dale.
So tell me, what is your poem tonight, Chris? Because I would love to hear what it is, and so would everybody else.
It's not about spaniels.
We already had our dog talk
I have
today.
two.
So, all right.
I'm waiting to hear that dog poem.
That was good.
I have two. I'm going to bring it way back down after Gerard Manley Hopkins. You know, Dale, I did Hopkins on one of our streams, and you gave me all kinds of grief for that.
I don't like Hopkins.
Yeah, no, So, very well, yeah. This first one is from a great California poet.
That's
It's,
a contradiction in terms.
Dedicated to my
Except for
friend.
my wife. My wife's the only Californian poet. There's no other Californian
Yeah,
poet.
well, there are a couple.
She's not a Californian poet. She's a Californian poem.
Yeah.
Oh,
Good
gee.
save. Good save.
Is this
Yeah, this is dedicated to my friend Dan Kerr.
Warren Zevon?
It is Warren Zevon.
Little old lady got mutilated late last night. Werewolves of London again.
This is an American poem This has nothing to do with the theme of the conference, but that was the other category. But there is a theology of the body element. It's in the first stanza. See if in the first line. I went home with the waitress, the way I always do. How was I to know she was with the Russians too? I was gambling in Havana. I took a little risk. Send lawyers, guns, and money. Dad, get me out of this. I'm an innocent bystander, and somehow I got stuck between a rock and a hard place, and I'm down on my luck. And now I'm hiding in Honduras. I'm a desperate man. Send lawyers, guns, and money. Has hit the fan. You don't know that song, Lawyers, Guns, and Money? All right.
No.
For real. Well, I mean, he is a great California poet. So, Saint Francis was a soldier. This is a war poem. There's a little story. In 1990, somebody do the math. 33 years ago. Thank you. I was an artillery officer in the Marine Corps in Okinawa, Japan, and it was about this time, I think August. And Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and we were getting ready to get on a boat. In the Navy, they call it a ship, and to go and stop him or send him back. Yeah, quite apart from the fact that it wasn't our business and all that. Anyway. I was looking forward to it because this is what I had trained to do as an artillery officer in the Marine Corps. And I was down in the, I was down with the battery. We were doing service on the cannons and the howitzers, we call them. And Lance Corporal Richards walked up to me and said, Lieutenant Check, the battalion commander wants to see you in his office. Now, some of you have been in the service. If you're a lieutenant and the battalion commander asks to see you, likelihood is somebody made a mistake. Very well, so I kind of organized my utilities, and I walked up and I pounded on the door. Actually, in the Marine Corps, we call that a hatch. Pounded on the hatch, Lieutenant Check, and he says, come in, Lieutenant Check. And he said, I want to give you something, and I think you'll appreciate this. It's a poem. And it's a poem by Rudyard Kipling. And it's about an artillery battery that is heading into action. And he handed it to me, and he said, if you can create this urgency in your men, you will win. You will win on the battlefield. And I thanked him for it. And as Dan observed earlier tonight, this poem has been working its way in the formation of my imagination for 33 years. So a couple of notes. It describes an artillery battery, so this would be a horse artillery. And imagine a cannon being pulled by a team of probably 6 horses, so 2, 2, 2. And Kipling uses an expression, two's off lead. So that would be gun 2, and the lead horse would be the foremost horse on the right. So foremost, a team of 2, 2, 2. So the foremost horse on the right, and then the off lead horse would be to the left of the lead horse. So 2's off lead, gun 2's off lead. So you have that. And Kipling uses another expression, head between his heels. So we have kind of an expression for that, but it's vulgar, so I can't say it. But just imagine somebody on his, back and dead, basically, but head between his heels. The third note is there's an epithet in the poem that to which attaches quite a bit more gravity than it did in Kipling's day, and so I've just substituted a different word that does not do offense to the meter. I'm not trying to attract more attention from the National Catholic Reporter for Dale. Yeah. One more note. This really ought to be recited by someone with a working class British accent, which is how Kipling writes the thing, but I'll make a go of it.
Do your Dick Van Dyke. Go on.
Yeah.
Come on, Chris. Step in time.
This happened in a battle to a battery of the corps, which is first among the women and amazing first at war. And what the bloomin' battle was, I don't remember now, but two's off lead, he answered to the name of Snarleyow. Down in the infantry, nobody cares. Down in the cavalry, colonel, he swears. But down in the lead with the wheel at the flog turns the bold bombardier to a little whipped dog. They was moving into action. They was needed very sore to learn a little schoolin' to a native army corps. They had nipped against an uphill. They were tucking down the brow when a tricky, trundling round shot gave the knock to Snarleyow. He went and fouled the limber. He was almost tore in two. This is why I brought the book. When a tricky trundling round shot gave the knock to Snarleyow, they cut him loose and left him. He was almost tore in two, but he tried to follow after, as a well-trained horse will do. He went and fouled the limber, and the driver's brother squeals, pull up for Snarleyow. His head's between his heels. The driver humped his shoulder, for the wheels was going round, and there ain't no stop conductor when a battery's charging ground. Says he, I broke the beggar in, and very sad I feels. But I couldn't pull up, not for you, your head between your heels. He hadn't hardly said the word when came a dropping shell, a little right the battery, and between the sections fell. And when the smoke had cleared away before the limber wheels, there lay the driver's brother, his head between his heels. Then says the driver's brother, and his words was very plain, for God's own sake get over me and put me out of pain. They saw his wounds was mortal, and they judged that it was best. So they took and drove the limber straight across his back and chest. The driver, he give nothing except a little coughing grunt, but he swung his horse's handsome when it came to action front. And if one wheel was juicy, you may lay your Monday head. 'Twas juicy for the natives when the case begun to spread. The moral of the story, it is plainly to be seen, you haven't got no families when serving the Queen. You haven't got no fathers, brothers, sisters, wives, or sons. If you want to win your battles, take and work your bloomin' guns. Down in the infantry, nobody cares. Down in the cavalry, colonel he swears. But down in the lead with the wheel at the flog turns the bold bombardier to a little whipped dog.
Great, thank you. Very Franciscan. Great stuff.
I kind of feel like the British Army in India is a little more action than St. Francis did.
What?
He was in one battle. He got knocked out very early.
Yeah.
Then it was over.
That's a lot of people don't know that Francis was a soldier. And that's why Chesterton makes a great deal of that. Takes that opening chapter that Francis the fighter. It's the last thing you associate with Francis. And he was a soldier. He wanted to be a hero, and he was, but he was not as a soldier. Yeah. Well, William, you've had a teaspoon of sleep. So you must be the most inspired of us all right now, because you are hallucinating. I would imagine some wonderful poetry could just come out of you extempore. But what did you bring for us tonight?
If only we had a jazz flute, I could just...
Jazz flute.
Well, as you said, I am recently returned from England, where I was on a pilgrimage that was in part praying for the restoration of Catholicism in the British Isles, in part helping Americans understand how very Catholic England was, and how magnificent and inspiring the saints of England are, and how appropriate, especially the period from 1534 to 1845 is for Catholics today, right? This is a period where the establishment is asking Catholics, just give us a little nod to show that you agree. Just a little, just a little conformity. And you have so many heroes. So I'm famous for, in our pre-Troubadour program, sending an email asking what we are to talk about. And I think at some point, maybe in Heathrow, I asked, what are we supposed to be doing? To which Dale said, please see the email thread where I explain this to you. So I tried to do my duty when I came back and grab a few things and think about St. Francis. So I have two poems, like everyone else. The first is by, they're new to me, so I'm going to read them. Like Joseph, I really didn't grow up memorizing very much poetry. I came late to poetry. I'm more of a historian. These are new poems to me, and the first one is of one of the English martyrs. I spent some time on my last full day in London, my birthday, in the room in which he was incarcerated for nearly a decade, just after I spent about a half an hour in Thomas More's cell. So this is the poet, or the Englishman, St. Philip Howard, Earl of Arundel. And what do you think of Arundel Cathedral? Do you like it? It was one of Belloc's favorites.
Yeah, Arundel Cathedral was obviously it's a modern cathedral. I like it a lot. I like it a lot because it's what's almost as close as we got to the old hierarchy of the English aristocracy, the Dukes of Norfolk. It's their cathedral, if you like, and no, it's a place of pilgrimage, but obviously it's modern, modern in terms of the 19th century.
Yeah.
You know.
So Philip Howard was imprisoned for the grave crime of being a Roman Catholic by Queen Elizabeth, and she never signed his death warrant, and so he ended up dying of dysentery. Most of the English martyrs were hung, drawn, and quartered. He died of dysentery, waiting almost a decade to see if maybe there would be a reprieve. His son was born about a month after he was incarcerated, and he never did get to see his son. He was a bit of a rake in his youth, and he came back to the faith through the prayers of his wife, and hearing one sermon of St. Edmund Campion, and then lived very pious life in the Tower of London. And he composed this hymn, it's called, "A hymn wherein the praises of all creatures are offered up unto the Creator." And I picked this one because it's simple, I like it, but also it seemed Franciscan. It reminded me a little bit of the Canticle of the Sun and the canticle that stands behind the Canticle of the Sun, the Benedicite, the Canticle of Daniel, or Psalm 148, shorter version of the same thing. So I'll give you that first. O Christ, the glorious crown of virgins that are pure, who dost a love and thirst for thee within the minds procure. Thou art the spouse of those that chaste and humble be, the hope, the life, the only help of such as trust in thee. All charity of those whose souls thy love doth warm. All simple pleasures of such minds as think no kind of harm. All sweet delights wherewith the patient hearts abound, do blaze thy name, and with thy praise they make the world resound. The sky, the land, the sea, and all on earth below, the glory of thy worthy name do with their praises show. The winter yields thee praise, and summer doth the same. Sun, the moon, the stars, and all do magnify thy name. The roses that appear so fair to outward sight, the violets with their scent do yield so great delight. The pearls, the precious stones, the birds, thy praise do sing, the woods, the wells, and all delights which from this earth do spring. What creature, O sweet Lord, from praising thee can stay? What earthly thing, but filled with joy, thine honor doth bewray? Bewray means make known. Let us therefore with praise thy mighty works express, with heart and hand, with mind and all which we from thee possess. I like that in particular because he wrote that from prison. Right? The Tower of London is considered a cushy prison by Elizabethan standards, but here he is describing the created order and its ability to praise God when his cell, which was one of the better cells, is maybe about a quarter the size of this stage, and he was allowed to walk around outside and have some movement, but he wasn't allowed to see any of his friends or his wife. He didn't see much greenery apart from through a window. He saw the stars, but despite all that, his mind turned towards how natural it is to praise God and how the natural order itself praises God. His only real contact with nature was he had a little dog, and the dog moved freely through the Tower of London. And the dog was able to convey messages between St. Philip Howard and St. Robert Southwell. So he's currently my favorite Catholic dog.
It was a spaniel.
You know, I think you're right.
Yeah, of course it was.
Yeah. It would have to be.
Right, yeah.
I mean, when you think about it,
Sure.
it have to be.
Spaniels are
Yeah.
Catholic dogs because they're from. That's
Yeah.
what spaniel means.
Yeah.
Spain. From
Yeah.
Spain.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's what spaniel means.
I'm sure you're right.
TopMeadowCavaliers.com.
Speaking of dogs, one of the things that was just providential when our pilgrim group was in London, the Victoria and Albert Museum had a temporary exhibition, which was on St. Francis. So, was it the National Gallery?
Yeah, National Gallery.
Well, Tessa would know because Tessa set it all up.
And now
So-
Tessa's going to come up and do her dog poem.
Yeah, and so in the National Gallery, there was a great exhibition where, amongst all sorts of art from all the ages, they had one of St. Francis's tunics that you could actually go and sort of reverence. But there were two paintings, speaking of dogs and St. Francis, which struck me. And it's one of my favorite stories in The Little Flowers of St. Francis, the story of the Wolf of Gubbio. And one is a 19th century painting, and it's of Gubbio and the wolf redeemed. And he's receiving a little treat from a butcher. The butcher is surrounded by all this meat, and the wolf is patiently sitting there, and he's receiving a little treat, and there's a dog sleeping by him, and a little girl petting him, and the wolf has this halo. And right around the corner, there's a 14th or 15th century painting of the Wolf of Gubbio placing his hand or his paw in St. Francis's hands, which is what you do in feudal order to show that you are a liege man. And behind the wolf is a forest, a path going into the forest that's strewn with body parts. So very different ways of approaching the natural order. The second poem is from a poet that I doubt anyone knows, Harry Elmore Hurd, who wrote several hundred poems and published about 12 books of poetry. It's a contemporary of Frost, and he's a regional poet. I like regional poets. I like fighting against the idea that the poetry that shows up in anthologies is all that we should read, because that discourages us from actually writing poetry and thinking about poetry a lot, because it gets too lofty. In fact, one of the things I like to do, I love Wordsworth, but a good exercise is to actually read 60 poems by Wordsworth, and you realize most of them aren't that good. But the anthologies present us a Wordsworth where I would like to write a bad poem of Wordsworth, don't get me wrong, but there's a lot of hewing that you have to do before you get a nice poem. So this is from the regional poet Harry Elmore Hurd and his book Yankee Boundaries, and it's entitled Monadnock. Mount Monadnock is about a 3,000-foot mountain, which out east is a good-sized mountain because our mountains are old, unlike the young California mountains, which are much higher. And I picked this poem because I found it very Franciscan. St. Francis received the stigmata at his request. He prayed that he could be united in the suffering of Christ. It's always struck me as interesting that he didn't pray for this in a city, which would have been a nice parallel. Christ spends much of his time in the countryside, and then when he goes to the city, he suffers and is crucified. Francis wants to share in the suffering of Christ, and what does he do? He goes east of Florence to Laverna, Mount La Pena, I think, and he's up about 6,000 feet in a mountain range that has been given to the Franciscans so that they can make these retreats. And there he receives the stigmata. And while I do absolutely agree with our apparition of Gilbert Keith Chesterton from earlier, that Francis is often gnomified, there is something to Francis's approach to nature which is worth considering. It was real. So here's Monadnock.
We can wait.
Well, yeah, we'll wait for that to finish. Go ahead. Take that call. Ooh, it could be serious. Yeah.
Hey, Chris, can I have that other glass of wine while we're waiting? Yeah. Is that all right? Yeah. All right. Yeah. Cheers. Cheers. Yeah. Salute. There you go. There you go. Thanks, Steph. Appreciate it. Thanks for waiting.
St. Francis and the beggar.
A little mountain fits within the heart, although its peak thrusts upward to the mind. Its keeper must acquire a lover's art if he would keep a wild thing thus confined. A man who keeps a mountain for his own must reverence it as he would serve a shrine. For there is something holy in a stone, something in a flower that is divine. If you would keep a mountain tame, beware of any fowler prowling with a gun, walking softly through its woodlands, lest you scare some timid creature resting in the sun. He who loves a mountain lives with song. His life uplifts to fields of starry light. The muscles of his intellect grow strong. His faith illuminates the darkest night.
Well, you cannot argue with the diversity that we demonstrated tonight with our choice of poems. None of us had consulted. We only went with what the assignment was. Poems that may or may not have something to do with the theme of the conference.
I feel like we should have more categories next time.
Instead of just two?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, well, next year, I'll give you more categories. Or maybe I'll just give you one category instead of the two. But anyways, we will, we have some wine.
Chris has the wine.
Give you some wine. The Troubadours will be back on the computer next month.
What's the theme next month, Dale?
Well,
Why don't we put it to the...
You know, this is interesting because every month we announce next month's theme and we never adhere to it. So I think we should go ahead and announce what the theme is.
Poems that may or may not have something to do with Marilyn Monroe. There we go.
But is there something that you would like to see the Troubadours discuss?
When sex becomes a tyrant.
When who?
When sex becomes
excuse
a
me,
tyrant.
When who becomes a tyrant?
No, when sex becomes a tyrant.
Who?
Sex.
You heard it correctly.
It's a line from St. Francis of Assisi. You were here, but Chesterton says the moment that sex ceases to be a servant, it becomes a tyrant. And she would like us to do a program on when sex becomes a tyrant. Any other suggestions? Spaniels.
Hey, that's a great idea.
All right. Well, hey, thank you for those suggestions.
We should talk about dogs, but Dale, who were we talking with earlier? Was it Eddie? What if we talked about aliens?
Aliens?
Alien.
Too real.
Parent?
What if we talked about aliens?
Legal aliens or illegal aliens?
Oh, sorry, Joseph. It's nationals.
Oh.
Yeah.
So
I don't get it.
Space nationals.
So you're talking about people from across the border? You're
No,
talking
no,
about
no.
people outside of the sphere of
He
the
does
earth?
mean that.
Yeah,
Okay. Okay, well, that's another suggestion. That's great.
I like
We
it.
had a suggestion at dinner. Winnie the Pooh.
That would be a dog, Chris.
No, Winnie the Pooh, the A.A. Milne.
The little bear. A.A. Milne.
The
Yeah.
A.A. Milne.
Children's literature. That's
Children's
it.
literature.
That's what we're doing.
Children's literature.
Boy.
The Degradation of Curious George. You know what the best thing that H.A. Ray wrote?
It was a book on the stars.
Book on the Stars.
Yep. Yep.
It's called Find the Constellations. And then he has another book simply called The Stars.
Yep. Yep.
If you can buy every science book in the world about astronomy, none of them compare to H.A. Ray's books on the heavens.
We had that in Checkhouse.
There are 3 institutions in the United States that use H.A. Ray, the stars. as a required text for astronomy?
I am only aware of 2 of them, Dr. Fahey.
What are the 2 that you know, Mr.
St.
Kerr?
Martin's Academy and St. Thomas More College of the Liberal Arts.
That's true. This is true. And the third is to my south, Massachusetts Institute of Technology. That is for astronomy majors the required first book that they read.
Sounds like the Chesterton Academy needs to add this to their curriculum there.
Sure does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Then they can get it out of the way.
Get somebody
so they
on
don't have
that,
to do
And
it
then
in
should we do
college.
the Curious George books along with that then?
No.
Or?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, they've all been degraded. Yeah.
Curious George and the Pancakes. Do you know that one? Yeah. They have been degraded.
Well, I suggest that that we dress up next time as the man with the yellow hat. Then I think. All right. Well, I have had enough of us. So we do have a couple of announcements for tomorrow. The first talk of the morning, which is at 8:30. That's the one you don't want to miss tomorrow. That's going to be absolutely outstanding. Tom Martin's going to talk about Chesterton and Solzhenitsyn. It's going to be outstanding. It's going to 9 o'clock, and it won't. Yeah, see, you already got to sleep an extra half hour just from that one bit there.
Not if they're going to go to
So-
mass. Is there mass?
Yeah, there's mass at 7:30. Yeah, okay. So do not miss the first talk, and then go to all the other talks, including the breakout sessions when there's 2 talks at once. Go to both of those each time. But do not miss Tom Martin tomorrow. You do not want to miss that. And then it'll be mass tomorrow evening, of course, is the banquet. Joe, are there any tickets left for individual tickets for the banquet? Yes? No?
We will open the doors for the traditions.
Okay, so the banquet itself is sold out. So if you did not get a ticket for the banquet, at the end, while we have completed our meals, we'll open it up, and you can still come and attend the traditions, the after banquet fun and stuff. So that's good. For the afterglow tonight, the hotel has agreed to keep the bar open till very late, very, very late, like 1 o'clock. 1 o'clock. The bar will be open till 1 o'clock, and they're also going to bring a small bar out into the patio area. So they have pleaded with us not to bring any of our own drinks. So they're doing their very best to accommodate us. So please honor them and don't. Okay. And then Jen Finke, where are you? She went out to take pictures. The pictures are in here. With the. Do you want to just go grab her and bring her back in here for a second? And by the way, does anybody else have a birthday today? Who else? Do you know that when you get this many people in the room, the chances are better than 90% that 2 people have their birthday the same day? It's not evenly spread out. Yeah, yesterday, that's close. That's really close. In fact, yesterday is almost today. Yeah. I will say this, my late brother's birthday today, so. Yeah, so how we doing getting Jen in here? Because we're going to honor her right now. So get ready to sing the song that is sung on this day.
Is it Lawyers, Guns, and Money?
Yes. Going to do a little Warren Zevon birthday. Casey Jones. That's a localism. Yeah, that's true localism. You can't find her. Well, should we sing to her anyway? All right, we won't. We'll sing to her tomorrow, and maybe we'll even sing to Glenn tomorrow, because it'll only be 2 days away from his birthday. All right. Well, with that, I want to thank my brother Troubadours. God bless you. Tomorrow, two of the Troubadours are going solo. Dan Kerr is going to give a talk on the liturgical rhythm of the year, and Joseph Pierce is going to give a talk on something.
Same
Same thing. Yeah, same. He'll give the same talk he gives every year. Doesn't matter. Same talk every year. You wonder why it's so good, because you're starting to learn it, and that's what we thank him for coming back year after year to give the same talk. All right. God bless. Good night.
Donate a Frankie ticket?